Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session. Welcome to Planetary Lives, championing sustainable and innovative agri-food practices for healthier lives. We are so grateful that you have joined us today to discuss this topic. This event is in collaboration with UNDP, the Foundation Louise Bondwell, and Stand for Her Land. Please give them a round of applause. So before we dive into the discussion with this engaging panel today, I will be sharing my thoughts, expectations, concerns, and my lived experience in Kenya, just to sort of start us off. So I grew up in a city called Thika in Kenya that for the longest time was an industrial city, but now it has changed with increased rural-urban migration. However, my upcountry in Kenya is the place where someone's parents grew up, is an area called Muranga that is very fertile and one of the bread baskets of the country. For the longest time, coffee was a predominant cash crop. However, most of the farmers have since removed their coffee plants and replaced them with other crops like avocado, maize, and horticultural plants like French beans. Dairy farming is also predominant in the area. So the reason why I'm sharing this story is to show you how agriculture is a core part of the country. So when it is threatened, many people's livelihoods are at risk as well. Due to climate change, our livelihoods are currently at risk, and I'm sure giving my story from Kenya, it's also the same around the world. So when we talk about climate change, this is something that is our current lived experience. Extreme weather conditions are being experienced across the globe, disrupting food availability and affecting food quality. For example, in Kenya, we are heavily reliant on rain-fed agriculture. In the recent years, we have missed rainy seasons, meaning that farmers have a difficult time planning when to plant, and part of the country, due to this, is experiencing severe drought. This this, of course, has an effect on the yields, meaning people don't have enough to feed themselves, let alone trade with others to make a living, leading to threatened livelihoods for communities reliant on agriculture. So this is a very important topic that we have globally, and we want to make sure we address food security concerns and ensure sustainable solutions. We hear the term sustainable all the time, but when we say sustainable, what exactly do we mean? So to me, sustainable food solutions refer to making sure that when we grow the food that nourishes our bodies, we can use the resources at our disposal efficiently, minimizing on wastage as much as we can, and even make it better where possible, remembering that we as humans are coexisting with the other species around us. So we are seeing increased interest by the youth in agriculture, which is a really good thing. However, there's still a lot of room to share knowledge and resources for them to be more embedded in agricultural systems in their countries. Access to resources is a key thing for the youth. So this like land, inputs, and knowledge, and seeing us being given such platforms enables us to communicate and share with stakeholders what our needs are and what we bring to the table. In fact, with the youth at the table. The energy the youth has is unmatched, and this can be seen in the different innovations they come up with because we have no choice but to do things differently. This way, it is imperative that the older generation who has access to resources and the younger generation who has energy and leverage on technology more work together and combine each other's strength in ensuring food secure nations. I'm here because I believe that while it won't be easy to end hunger and food insecurity, together it's possible and the effort will be worthwhile. Yeah. So let's hear from a few people who feel the same. Yeah. So I'll start with you, Maria. If you could tell us a bit about yourself and yeah, what this year's theme, Healthy Diets, Healthy Planet, means for you.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here in such a relevant contest to talk with you guys. And so a couple of words on my side. My name is Maria Chiara, and I have an humanistic background. Then I decided to move to marketing and communication, and I started working in a worldwide company, Bolton Group. And then 4 years ago, I joined Bonduelle Group. And since 2 years, I'm responsible of the Louis Bonduelle Foundation, implementing local activities focused on food waste and food transition. For those who might not know, Bonduelle is a French family company, and it's one of the world leader in plant-based food. I really would like to tell you what's the mission of Bonduelle Group is to inspire the transition towards a plant-based diet to contribute to people's well-being and the planet health, which I believe it's really connected to the Food Forum's objective. And what about the Louis Bonduelle Foundation? Well, it was established in 2004, so almost 20 years ago, and it with the objective to put in practice what the mission, Bonduelle mission is. So I'm sure I'm going to tell you a bit more of the initiatives of the Louis Bonduelle Foundation during the session we are going to spend together. So thank you for now.
Thank you, Maria, for that. So I'll pass it to you, Carly, to also tell us a bit about yourself and your connection to this year's theme.
Thank you, and good to be with you all as well. My name is Carly Craybill. I work with Habitat for Humanity International. We're an international organization that really focuses on housing, but we're here today to really dive into land rights and how that links to this year's conference. So I support our government relations and advocacy program, specifically through global advocacy campaigns. So from 2016 to 2020, Habitat for Humanity ran a global advocacy campaign around access to land for housing. And when we think about improving access to adequate housing, we can't do that without thinking about land. And that's why we also have joined as an organization. We sit on the steering committee of a women's land rights campaign called Stand for Her Land. And we recognize that improving the property rights of women across the rural to urban continuum has a catalytic effect, elevating the standards of communities around the world. So Stand for Her Land is a women's land rights campaign that's working with grassroots coalitions of men and women to across the Americas, Asia, and Africa, working to improve policies, social and cultural norms, and really ensuring that the implementation of accessing land is feasible. And our collective goal through the Stand for Her Land campaign is to ensure that a woman's right to securely own, live on, and work on their land is implemented in practice. So we do that by partnering with advocates across sectors, so environmental and gender equality sectors as well. And how that links to biodiversity, nutrition, and food security is that we know that land is power. So women with land rights are more resilient to climate change and biodiversity. They're more likely to drive gender equality and increase food security. So 345 million people around the world are facing food insecurity. And over the past couple years, we've seen through COVID, conflict, and poor harvests that changing weather patterns have pushed the global price for food, fuel, and fertilizer up. And this has seen macroeconomic shifts that make it more expensive for poor countries to import food. So Stand for Her Land works to champion solutions that help women break the cycle of poverty and food insecurity to improve their lives, their families, and their communities. And we know that that really begins with access to land. So I want to just briefly, before we dive into lots of other things, share an example of what Stand for Her Land is doing in Bangladesh to help kind of paint a picture. So in Bangladesh, Stand for Her Land is advocating for secure women's land rights via government allocations of public land, shifts in social norms that limit recognition of women as farmers, and legal literacy so that women know what their land rights are. Know what their rights are. So in Bangladesh, it's a highly vulnerable country to climate change. And women living in rural agricultural areas are disproportionately affected. That's through droughts, cyclones, floods, other climate-related disasters. And Stand for Her Land seeks to support through a combination of secure tenure, climate-resilient agriculture, technologies and inputs, and an adaptation mechanism for marginalized women farmers. So really connecting that climate piece, women, and land together. And land is power. We know that women's land rights are inextricably linked to the issues of today, including the focus of today's conference. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carly, and sharing the connection between the different facets. So now I'll move to Elisa. If you could introduce yourself and also tell us a bit about what you do, and also if you can connect it to this year's theme of healthy diet, healthy planet.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Elisa. I am the manager of the United Nations Development Program office in Rome here, so I just didn't have to come very far, 0 kilometers almost. So I'm very pleased to be here with you, and actually the main reason why we're here is that we recently launched an initiative which focuses on young people and climate change. So we really in partnership with the Italian Ministry of Environment, we really want to promote the actions and the ideas of young people to tackle climate change. And for that reason, I'm very pleased to be here and to have a chance to introduce that to you, and hoping that you will want to join and submit your ideas. I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll dive into it maybe a little bit later.
Sure. Thank you, Elisa. So there's definitely something for you to hold on and hear about towards the end, what Elisa and team have for us. Great. So maybe just delving a bit into the conversation, Maria, if you could tell us more about the role of education today in changing the behavior of the future.
Yes, sure. So as Louis Bonduelle Foundation, we strongly believe that it's never too early to speak about such an important topics such as food transition or food waste with the young generation, future generation. That's why I really would like to tell you a bit more about a concrete example which is running since more than 10 years. It's a game. It is called I Giochi di Inorto. It's a gardening game where kids from 6 to 12 they at the end they need to create a real garden. They take care of vegetables. They learn how important food and fruits and vegetables are for a balanced diet, and they also become more aware about food waste and their consequences. So we really like to do these initiatives with kids because they will be the future generation. We reached more than 3,000 children, and of course their families too. Yeah, let's say we try to inform, we try to educate in a light and in a fun way, because we are speaking with kids, of course. And another initiative I would like to share with you, always speaking about Louis Bonduelle Foundation. So we inform people about food waste through to a blog, which is called Richie Blog, where food has a second life, as a kind of payoff. We have 3 journalists, expert on these topics. They give some advice or tips, basically, on how to reuse, for instance, potato skins or tangerine peel, not only in other recipes, so not only in the kitchen, but also to make something else, for instance, soap or face masks, or even something to decorate your house. So we really believe that those 2 initiatives are a tangible and concrete example of how for the Louis Bonduelle Foundation education means. So we are not here we don't want to teach something. We are not expert I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a teacher, but in a light and fun way, we would like to try to give some messages to the young generation first of all. And I'm sure I will come back later on a very cool initiatives which started this year about also young people. So thank you for now. And
Wow, that's very interesting. Hearing about the interventions in the gardening aspect and also the food waste, like knowing what we can do at our own levels, at home or as individuals to manage some of these things. So thanks for sharing that, Maria. And Kali, for you, you're the youngest member of the steering committee at Stand for Her Land. What, in your view, is the potential of young people in catalyzing lasting change for wider communities while they are engaged in sustainable farming?
Thanks. And first off, I'd like to say I'd like to know how to make tangerine soap myself. So if you want to pass that along. Yeah, so I am the youngest member of the steering committee. And so I'm honored to be here and be able to share with folks. I think what comes with that is it means, one, I'm not an expert in a lot of these issues, but I get to be a part of the kind of creative brainstorming and solutions. And I think first off, I think young people know their experiences best. They are their own experts. It's their lived experience. So I spent a year when I was younger as a youth organizer in Chicago, working with middle schoolers and high schoolers. So what's been really cool about this conference is how big of a focus there is on youth. But I also think in some ways, I'm like, we almost might be going too old. Like I'm the youngest on the steering committee, but I still in some ways feel like I'm too old to be the one up here talking about some of these issues. One, a lot of it doesn't directly impact me in quite the same way. And I think for so many young people, that are deeply impacting it, there's not platforms for them to be able to share their experience. There's not systems for them to even be able to process what they're experiencing, but yet they are still experts in so many of these issues. I think what's really exciting about young people too is that so often, even if there aren't these systems in place, they're not necessarily sitting around and waiting for people to be like, hey, you want to come up and see change? They're going to jump up, they're going to initiate it themselves. And I think that we have so much to learn from young people in terms of how we actually seek change. I think we can get pretty complicated and in the weeds pretty quickly. Also a bit jaded on many of the issues that we're talking about in terms of how we address them. And the sooner that we engage young people, in particular, I think young women, we'll start getting some really exciting and creative issues or solutions to the issues that we're seeing. In terms of Habitat for Humanity as well, I just wanted to share a little bit of, in particular in Africa, as well as other places, but in Africa, our regional strategy, we're really trying to encourage youth engagement and kind of talking about this phrase of nothing about us without us. And I think that applies to women's land rights, to women and youth in terms of how they engage. But it also, in terms of the policy work that we're doing, I think that many folks here might agree that policy is not super sexy. It's not always easy to explain to people. It's not always easy to get people engaged. But it's so important. And it's important that we're really including young people and women in actually achieving policy change. And that's kind of coming from two angles. So one is that we have to be engaging people to actually see that change. And then also, we have to have policies and systems in place that ensure there's actually that empowered participation and stakeholder engagement piece. And so it's kind of a bit of both. And how do we think about ensuring that we're doing both of those? So I think that these are often groups that are overlooked. And if we're going to think about addressing issues, we need to make sure that they're at the table and that we are ensuring there's ways for them to even be able to get to the table. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I really like what you mentioned. Nothing about us without us. And I think the opportunity that we've had at the forum has really, it's helping us get into these spaces as we share our views and also get our stakeholders, to share theirs. And that exchange of ideas, I think, is very rich. Yeah. So, Elisa, coming to you, I'd love to hear what part of the motivation was to put some investment in promoting like the youth initiatives that you have?
So I think as we heard from you and from both of you, as both at UNDP and our main partner at the Italian Ministry of Environment, but also all the many partners that we're working with, we really feel that we had to offer something tangible and concrete to young people to develop their creative idea. And this to tackle climate change, but also specifically this year, we're going to be having as one of the topics, food and agriculture. And I actually, if it's okay with you, just like to show you a short video, which is going to do a bit of talking instead of me. And then I'll be happy to explain a little bit more, and hopefully you will have some questions or you'll be able to discuss with your peers and see if that's an interesting opportunity for you to develop something new and creative. No, thank you. Okay, so basically what we're launching is a challenge, and the challenge is composed of two main components. One is a financial award, and one is an opportunity to engage with other young people who are developing innovative ideas, and also to engage with all of our partners in terms of accessing mentoring programs, trainings, peer-to-peer exchanges. So I think you just mentioned there's not many platforms that offer an opportunity to exchange. Another component of the initiative is really a platform that is by young people, for young people to exchange on issues like related to climate change and how to tackle the problem, whether it's at local level or at a regional or larger scale. So for us, it was very important to actually put something on the table to motivate people to think outside of the box and come up with new ideas. So when we talk about innovation, we talk about something that is either completely new, that doesn't exist, and someone has a brilliant idea and we want to support that and give a chance to develop it and see where it goes. Or it's something that is new within that context. So it's something that maybe someone has heard about within a different context, but wants to adapt it and see whether it would work within the scope of what they do and where they work. So that's basically the initiative that we want to launch. As I said, one of the topics for this year is food and agriculture. So we really hope to get some proposal and some ideas in this area. Just for your information, the others are urban sustainability, education, and access to energy. As we know, energy is very high on everyone's agenda at the moment. And we also have the opportunity of submitting an idea which tackles more than one of these topics, as we know that they're often connected and interrelated. So if you have any questions, I'm here, of course.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elisa, for that. I'm sure there'll be some questions after, just to understand the challenge more. So, Maria, we hear a lot about food security in many parts of the world. In Africa, where climate change and the impact of the war in Ukraine are deeply affecting the most fundamental access to food. As well as in Europe, right? So where rising costs are jeopardizing people's livelihoods. So what's the potential of a lasting shift in plant-based food to address these challenges?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, basically nowadays we are living in a really strong period, which is, I would say, touching our life at, of course, a different level. I'm now speaking about the Bonduelle Group and not about the foundation, just because Bonduelle, for its nature, is a plant-based company. We sell vegetables in each form, so frozen, canned, and of course fresh. And it is already written in our mission. We inspire the transition towards a plant-based diet to preserve planet and of course to contribute to people's well-being. So imagine how important it is for us and how, yeah, it's really, I said, it's in our DNA to speak about plant-based. So to feed 9 billion people by 2050, it's becoming really crucial to increase the portion of plant-based in our plate. Probably I'm going to say something obvious, but a shift towards a plant-based food can lead to a substantial reduction of greenhouse gas emission and of course to reduce the pressure on forest and on land to preserve our beloved planet at the end. But it's not only the role of the company such as Bonduelle truly committed into this mission. I really believe that it's up to everyone because the food we eat, we buy, and the way we cook, the way we store, all have an impact on the agri-food system. So we all can be the actor of the real change. For instance, by just slightly changing our habits, by buying something which is healthier, which is something which is local, which is seasonal, or for instance, buying less food with a high carbon impact. So I hope to answer to your question.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, I think there you've helped us see like the link between our diets and the and the health of the planet. So something for us to think about. Yes, so we have a question. Oh, go for it.
Thank you. And I was interested in the last part of what you said, that we should eat like healthier, more local, and also more foods that are better for with less carbon emissions. What does Bonduelle do to like make this more clear to consumers? So as a consumer, I'm walking through the supermarket, I'm seeing something of Bonduelle. Is there something on like the packaging, or is there like some way that I can see that it's it's better for the environment or for people or societies?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Of course, today here I'm with the head of the foundation, and with foundation we don't sell products, so we don't want to speak about products itself. But of course, the question is really, really keen to the point. Yeah, at the global level. Yeah, I'm now speaking at Italian. About Italy, because I know the Italian market. Yeah, we try to give some advice on the packaging. Maybe not in the front, but maybe on the back side. We try to be as much as possible transparent. We have a program which is called in Italian Bonduelle si impegna. In France, Bonduelle s'engage. So it's a kind of commitment we have. So yes, the packaging can be really the first touch point for consumers. So we have some information, of course. Pulses are becoming more and more used for pulses or legumes. I don't know the right word, but pulses is okay. Beans, chickpeas, lentils, they are really becoming more and more popular into our life, let's say, and we try to push, we try to find new varieties to think about more in the future perspective. So I hope to have answered. And of course, website is full of information. How many varieties do we have? How many hectares? How many farmers? Local farmers? Yeah, for fresh product, for instance, we have a guaranteed filiera. Sorry, I don't know now what to say, but supply chain, guaranteed Italian supply chain. We put the Italian flag. So yes, everything is tracked, and it depends on the product. But for fresh, we yeah, everything is put on the packaging. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So yeah, I encourage some questions even to our online audience. Feel free to type them and we can follow on here. So I see one more.
Thank you for this speech. It's really interesting. I have something to ask about food poverty, for example, because I did an internship in France. So I think it's a French experience. We can't generalize this idea, but we are working a lot on the quality of food and the fact that it's local and it's with more vegetables, etc. But we are facing a growing poverty, and people can't afford sometimes this kind of food because the price is higher. And so I really appreciate the work that is done to make people aware of what is in stake, of the issue of the food they are buying. But sometimes they have no choice. And so my question is, how can we push people to buy this kind of food to make this yes, to deal with this kind of issue, but taking into account that some of them do not have the money. Yeah. Thanks.
Always for me, or maybe we can open the discussion.
I can open the floor. Carla, Elisa, if you would
Yeah,
want to jump in.
Let's
feel
say maybe
free.
I can start, and the only thing that I can say, just it's my personal opinion. As I said before, our role is to, especially a company truly committed to the food transition to plant-based, is to inform, educate kids, educate their parents, of course. So that's something we can do, just inform, and probably I don't know, it's not enough, or but at least it's something to start from. It's we are a company, so we do sell product, and we also experience the prices, the increase of prices dramatically. So, and we are not, of course, we are not reversing all the price we had as well. We are absorbing, so we are not putting all the the high percentage in the towards consumers, of course not. So it's also a way, if we can say, to preserve people. So we also have to manage and to balance our we need to be a sustainable company. So at the end, we do the best, as I told you, to not reverse all the increase we had towards consumers. That at least something which we did, and I think a lot of other companies did, and they are doing in these days. Thank you.
Yeah, Carla.
Yeah, I mean, I think that mine won't be quite as specific to what the kind of the core of your question was, but more in terms of thinking about how I think part of the solution will just look different in a lot of different places. And so the piece that I wanted to kind of just jump in with, which I think applies a bit more to rural areas. So again, might not be some of the key pieces that you're hitting on. But in terms of thinking about women's land rights and food, I think there's ways that it's connected. Because women with increased land rights, it's linked to increased agricultural productivity and so more local access. And there's benefits, we see benefits for families, so children, larger communities. And so I think there's again places there if we can improve women's access to land for agriculture and production, we'll see linkages elsewhere, and it could go all the way up to supermarkets. I can't speak to that piece quite as much, but I think we would see shifts in that. But I think we'd also see shifts in more local access. And women, rural women are really the backbone of agriculture and the guardians of household food security. And so again, I think there's a lot of places where if we ensure that we're including women's access to land, it may feel somewhat disconnected to folks who are in supermarkets, but I think there's a lot of places that it actually is linked in interesting ways. So that's all I've got to add.
Thank you, Carla. And Elisa, I think this might have a good connection. You know, solving our problems with solutions that are led from from our current context. So they could address such things like affordability. I don't know if you have something to chime in on that.
Yes, thank you. And I mean, of course, we recognize that the scale of the problems and the complexity it can really be daunting, right? When especially we now look at the nexus between food prices, energy access, everything is compounded by climate change. As the UN Development Programme, we have the mission to support the achievement of sustainable development goals and end poverty, but that is way more complicated than just that. And we do understand that we don't have the ambition of finding solutions to everything, but we do see that the role of young people is really central to come up with new and innovative solutions that work within that context. And that's why we really want to promote those ideas and try to see if they work, and if they fly out, they can be replicated and scaled so that we find those solutions, those gems that are really relevant within that context. And we don't want to be prescriptive about it. We have some teams, like I said, for this year, including food and agriculture, but we're not limiting the ability to think out of the box in terms of which kind of idea would work for you and you'd want to put forward. And maybe if you don't mind, I also want to take the opportunity to answer a question that came through the chat.
Sure.
So I just want to clarify, this is open to young people. So as individuals, or it's a challenge that is also open to young people who are working in youth-focused or youth-led organizations. This can be CSOs or CBOs, and also in the private sector, so for example, startups. It is not open to government agencies, so everyone applying has to be a young person or a team of young people.
Great. Thank you for that, Elisa. And maybe just to make the connection, I hope some of you were able to see the TRC challenge yesterday, though that was basically mostly with the researchers. And now today we'll be having some startups who have, developed ideas in their different countries. So yeah, feel free to come. So that's part of one of the programs for the World Food Forum's Innovation Lab. Yeah, so something to look out for later today as well. Great. So maybe delving a bit into food waste. Maria, if you could just give your views on some of the real changing, some practical things that we can do to avert food waste at our level, and how this is good for the planet, for example.
Thanks, Charlene. In this case, I'm also going to tell you a bit more about another initiative, which we started this year with the Louis Bondual Foundation. But first of all, I really want to underline that both companies and also consumers, people, they need to play their role. because, as I said before, we are all are actor of the real change. Just maybe one figure from Doxa. We know that 96% of Italian population has a clear perception of food waste, but only 43 knows how severe is this situation. So, okay, we know, but maybe not in depth all the consequences and maybe the reason why. So, as I said before, we put a lot of efforts in informing people, and youth is one of our key public. So I'm going to tell you more about this initiative targeting university students living in colleges of merit in Italy. There are, I believe, 50 colleges in Italy of merit. We did a short we did a tour, and this project was called the Zero Waste Tour. What was in concrete? We organized a show cooking where a chef was preparing a meal. We organized an aperitivo, so which was a light moment to speak about these topics, but in a really light way. And the chef, he prepared food with food which maybe was not could not be eaten anymore or was not perfect, and also with the vegetables left over. So it was really incredible to see how good, how delicious was this food. Also, students were impressed about the fact that mayonnaise sauce was made of cauliflower. So, and so he was really doing the show cooking, he was preparing the meal, while he was also telling all the benefit of maybe pulses, or he was also giving some tips how to store some food in your refrigerator, in the upper part or in the dump. He is the expert. If you would like to know something, I can tell you more, but he was the expert. So we invited someone who was really into that topic. So we are going to do this activity also for next year, and we did it we did this year, and we did in occasion of the World Environment Day, the 5th of June. So probably also for 2023 we will do the same initiative. And once again, it's a tangible initiative addressed to young people, because we think that they are really fertile soil to be watered. Kids, speaking with kids, of course, it's more futuristic, but speaking about students, university students, it's really, we need to be there. It's really a key target group for us. So I think that this initiative could really say something about our role as a foundation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. The emphasis of us using all parts of our food, and and how that then translates to the bigger picture of the effects that come from that is quite insightful. So, if Carly, you could tell us a bit more on safe housing, the initiatives you have with Habitat for Humanity, and how that has an impact on maybe access to land to grow our food. And most young people, at least from where I come from, they have limited access. So if you can speak to that a bit.
I wanted to hit back on your question from the audience. I found two statistics. So for folks that like statistics, I thought I'd at least share this. And these are FAO numbers. So the FAO estimates that if women had the same access to productive resources as men, they could increase yields on their farm by 20 to 30%. And so that the gains in agricultural production could lift some 100 to 150 million people out of hunger. So I was like, those are huge numbers of just thinking about in terms of your question that you'd asked about access to food, of how that links to women's land peace. So I was like, oh, these are good two stats. So I thought I'd bring it back to that. And Elisa too, I was just gonna say, I love to see how you guys are giving financial support. I think that it's one thing to say we support youth. It's another thing to actually come with the money. So I think that's super exciting. And I do hope that folks share that opportunity with other young people or promote it on social media, because I think that often can be one of the key barriers that prevents people from actually being able to see change. So yeah, so to your question, So Habitat for Humanity works in about 70 countries around the world. And we focus really on housing. And as I shared earlier, we really can't think about housing without thinking about land first. It's such a foundational piece. In so many of the places, almost all the areas that we work, one of the key barriers to accessing adequate housing is accessing land. And in particular, this is an issue that women more often are facing, is that they simply cannot access land, and that has very real impacts for themselves and their families. So if their partner, their husband passes away, there are many situations in which the women are completely forced to leave their homes. Their name is not on the title. That is no longer their home. So there's very real ways that this plays out, and recognizing how important it is for housing. And another piece that I think, again, links to food is climate resilience and housing and land. And those are so closely linked as well. If a disaster strikes, often families may not even want to leave their homes because they don't have proof that that's where they live. So if they leave and come back afterwards, they can't prove that that's where their home had been, or they do leave and there's no place for them to return to without that secure tenure. And insecure tenure really lies at the root of poverty housing. And it deprives residents of their most basic physical, economic, and psychological security that comes with secure land and housing rights. It disproportionately impacts women, it disproportionately impacts youth, and people living in hazard-prone areas. So billions of people around the world lack adequate housing, millions more lack secure tenure and live in constant fear of eviction, and many more are displaced yearly from disasters that happen. The scale of the challenge is enormous, and it can feel daunting much of the time. Right now, the UN projects that there's about 1.8 billion people that lack adequate housing and anticipate that to grow to 3 billion people by 2030. Of that number, it's about 1 billion people that live in informal settlements. And that's another area that we really see being at risk, that are a marginalized and vulnerable population. And thinking about how that folks who live in informal settlements are often at risk for disasters. One of the key components of living in an informal settlement is lacking secure tenure, so ownership of your land, of your home. And so these are all so closely connected when we think about housing and how we address those solutions, and it being so critical that it's local to wherever we're working. We can come up with a lot of like tools and resources, but it truly needs to come from the communities. The key barriers vary within each community, and we want to ensure that the communities are the ones that are identifying what are the core barriers, what are those key solutions that they'll want to implement within their area. And one example that I want to share, similar to the example I shared earlier in Bangladesh, is in Nepal. So Nepal is one of the 20 most disaster-prone countries in the world. And Habitat for Humanity and partners in Nepal work to influence the government to allocate land and funding to support 10,000 low-income families that had been displaced from flooding. So that was working on trying to look at what are the current housing and land policies, how do they need to change them, and then actually successfully partnering with the government to get land and funding secured for these families. So it's focused primarily on a marginalized group of the Dalit people, and then women within that, again, more focused on improving it for women. And what I find super interesting is trying to think about how we can scale policy. So you can start at a smaller scale. So that was focusing on a community of 10,000 people. And then Habitat for Humanity Nepal and partners. It really is not something that any one organization or community, I think, can do alone. It's really trying to think through who are you bringing into trying to achieve that change. We're able to then take that from one community and scale it to other communities and to the federal level. And I think that's where policy and systems change, and that's what I work in and get super jazzed about, is policy allows you to scale that. You can do something, you can kind of pilot it, test it in one community, it's community driven, and then how can you think about showing that it worked and then really ensuring that implementation piece. And I think that implementation of policy is huge when it comes to women's land rights. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that we're advocating for climate resilience, land rights, gender equality, and it all being so linked, and again having direct linkages to access to food and production.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yes. So I see you there. So I'll get to you in a bit. So I think, Carly, you've brought us to a really good place. Thinking about these high level discussions and how we get to do real change on the ground and offer the solutions. So for example, we have like COP coming up soon. So how do we advocate for some of these things and see them translated, from the discussion to things happening on the ground? So like the Nepal project you've shared is quite good. Elisa, Maria, would you have some responses to this on how, for instance, UNDP is helping translate some of these discussions, in addition to the project you've shared with us on the ground?
Yes, thank you. So put me a bit on the spot here because, of course, UNDP has very many initiatives. So I'm trying to sort of think through what would be the most relevant. But because you said, of course, as every year we have the COP coming up and there's expectations and ambitions, and you were just talking about policy, for example. One of the major initiatives the UNDP is working on is supporting countries in the improvement of their nationally determined contributions. And although this sounds like a lot of jargon and specific terms, but really there is where you see how countries are also including, for example, the participation of young people in terms of making that change happen, or how to facilitating this in terms of having dedicated, targeted programs or initiatives at that level, as well as several other areas. So I would encourage you, for example, if you are interested on the topic of climate change and the COP coming up, to look up our Climate Promise, which is our flagship event in terms of supporting action and supporting the partner countries in that, achieving that transformational change on the ground.
Thank you. Great. So I'll pass it to you for your question.
Thank you. It was just a comment. And I want to comment like some data you gave us and also your question, because it's all related. I mean, you mentioned just poverty, but as we can see, like rural women and also kids and also youth, we face, and I say we because I'm Jana and woman too, we face some challenges and some different realities. It's not only poverty, but it's also at the same time that we are facing climate change. We are facing, for instance, the UN just like, I think 1 month ago gave us some statistics, and they say that in our case, after pandemic, we have to wait 280 years to try to have the same rights as men do. So we won't see it, but at least we can work on it and try to see some changes. So one important thing is try to work together, because for instance, if a foundation is working alone and it's not articulated with international organizations, with local government, with national government, it's going to be so hard, because you need budget to do some impacts and try to face all the challenges that some communities have. So it's so hard. It's like a lot of gaps that we have to face between, when in our case we work with Latin America and the whole Americas, and we have some different realities. It depends on the place that you go, but there are some things in common that I just said that all rural women have. So it's very, very important. Try to I'm sorry, I'm doing my Spanglish right now. It's so important trying to work together, trying to Zoom, to try to understand what are the needs. Because for instance, if you are trying to do like national government something to rural women and you don't understand where are the realities, what do they need, it's going to be so difficult to try to help them. So those are some ideas that I want to share too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, just highlighting the need for the different synergies from the different partners needed to, solve some of these challenges that we have. Do we have any questions online that have come through that we could address? No? Okay. Any other question from the room? Yes.
Thank you very much for your very good presentation on housing. And I was keen to know if maybe you have any programs that focus on after you've given somebody who did not have a home, do you also go ahead and have programs like things to help them build kitchen gardens or something related to vertical farming?
So I couldn't speak to that being a common thing across how we're working in about 70 countries and we have national organizations that are leading a lot of the work. There would be some that they may have programs like that, and it really might be more likely that Habitat's focusing on the housing component. So it might include like smokeless stoves, for example, but it's more that's related to the housing piece still. But working with partners, and so building relationships with the community and thinking about what are those other components. So it's less likely that it'd be led by our organizations if it's linked to farming components. There may be some places that I just can't, I don't know enough of kind of directly what they're doing, but I think likely that's where it would be working with other partners that we're kind of doing the housing piece, and then others are thinking about the components of, to me, that's a lot of like what's an actual sustainable, resilient community, and housing is a component of it, a really foundational piece. But I think there are other elements that you're getting at, and how do we ensure that? But I can't think of any specific examples, but it's a good question. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So perhaps as we wind up, I'd love to hear from you what some of your hopes are. So perhaps if we meet in this room next year, or just some aspirations when it comes to this area around food security.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think what you were kind of getting at was really interesting to me, and I support advocacy campaigns, and that's something that I get really excited about. So both through the Stand for Her Land campaign and Habitat for Humanity runs our own global advocacy campaign as well, and it really provides that opportunity of alignment, but in lots of different places. So it's contextual issues and solutions, but you're allowing for that cross learning, understanding of what solutions are, being able to like build momentum, elevate kind of resources, access to resources, and that all being really able to help drive a core issue focus. So it allows you to be able to focus on one area, but really working on it everywhere. So I think some of what you were talking about it was exciting to me, because I think that's a lot of what advocacy campaigns can do. And so it's then hard to figure out how do you narrow the advocacy campaign. We need an advocacy campaign for everything. But for me, I think a year from now, I hope that we can continue to have more successful examples where we've seen successful policy and systems change. Policy and systems change can take a really long time. So I don't know that it'll suddenly be next year we'll be back and be like, wow, well, every woman has access to land now. It's going to be a long journey. But the more stories and success we see, the more likely that is of it accessing resources, and that means that more places are doing it. And so if we're not talking about it, if we're not trying to address it, it truly will not happen. And I think a key piece is, again, ensuring that we have women included in that full process and we have youth included. Youth are so deeply impacted, and this is going to be their future. And so we need to make sure that they're at the table. So for me, it's more policy and systems change for improved access to land and housing, and more women and youth at the table. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
So 1 year from now, I think my hope will be that I'll be sitting at the back of that room, and someone will be sitting here and presenting their ideas and sharing them with the other participants at next year's edition of the forum. And we can see how that is working and progressing, and we can learn from the implementation phase. Thank you.
Thank you.
I give you just a number. According to Coldiretti, every year per person, we waste 67 kilos. So, and also from Coldiretti, we know that 35 of Italian people declare that in the coming months, they are ready to cut waste. So 1 year from now, it will be just good enough if 35% of people who just declare to do it, they will just do it with some concrete action. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. If you could join me in just giving our panelists a hand. And thank you to our online audience. We're so glad you could join us today. Yeah, and I urge us on to just keep engaging, and yeah, nothing about us without us. So let's keep our spirits up. Thank you.